The soil test just came in. Today is part one of an interview that I had with Utah State University Soil Lab Manager on the results of my soil test report. Before we get to that, please like, subscribe, leave your comments down below. Let's dig in. Years ago, when I had just begun to garden, I remember helping out a neighbor of mine plant peas, and they turned out to be a beautiful crop. Around mid-June, these peas started to become yellow and withered and died. Come to find out, about 3 inches below the surface, there was an existing sandbox. It's important to know what's your soil history and what's down below. Another year, this same neighbor of mine had acquired some compost locally, brought it home, applied it to his ground, tilled it in, and he planted a vegetable garden. Later on in the season, his plants became stunted, yellowed, and he lost some crops. I wish we would have known about taking a soil sample and doing a soil test. Had we have known, we would have understood the soil's history and how much compost to apply to his ground. Although compost is great, there is such a thing as putting on too much compost or no compost at all. Moderation is key to everything, and it's just about finding out what's right for your soil. I'm here with Tiffany Evans, and why don't you introduce yourself, Tiffany?
My name is Tiffany Evans, and I am the lab manager here at the USU Analytical Lab, usual for short. And we are a nutritional analyzing lab that does everything you might need. So most of our business is soil, but we can also do water samples. So we do irrigation and livestock testing. And we can do compost manure testing, so anything that is going to be amended to the soil. We can also do plant tissue analysis. So if you're ever having a problem with raspberries showing deficiencies, we can test that to see kind of where those levels are too.
What's the benefits of a soil sample? What does the soil analysis tell us right there?
Kind of a couple of reasons as to why you might want to test. So the biggest one is you're trying to produce more productive, healthier plants. In the end, which is good for everybody. But it also saves people money, and it can also kind of help with the environment. So it's kind of a three reason why you should. The biggest one is a lot of people are over-fertilizing. To add fertilizer every year, just assuming that you need it. And that just kind of gets back into the system, gets back into the water and environment, and then it also is just costing money. And the plants kind of suffer too.
Is any amount of compost good, or is there such a thing as too much?
We have kind of a saying in the lab. We say, you're loving your plants a little too much. I love that. You don't need to add compost every year. It is something that you should check. We usually say every other year, or if you're seeing a problem in the soil. So a lot of times, depending on what your results say, it does depend on how much you need to add. So a lot of times it can be anywhere from just like a half an inch of compost or so that you'll till into the ground. But it is definitely based on the results.
Okay.
And we can go from there after you know that.
Do certain plants take up more nutrients?
They do, so it does depend on the crop. Some people that have like a high phosphorus levels, you might want to plant something that likes phosphorus, like potatoes, to try to get it to go down slower. But there is, or some plants, not necessarily home gardens, but farming, some crops like higher salinity. So it would be easier to plant certain crops based on your salt content. So there's some that are more tolerable to things and some that just can't handle it. So it's good to check, what they like before you plant.
What are the main problems that you see from the home gardener that brings in their soil samples to the lab?
Seems like it's over-fertilization. So you'll have high salt levels, high phosphorus, high potassium. So those are usually the major three that are too high. We do have a threshold. The salinity should be below 1.5 decisiemens per meter. And then we do have some thresholds for phosphorus and potassium also. We do have different levels. Like we like to see phosphorus below 30. And the potassium is supposed to be below 400. So just to give people an idea, it usually is over-fertilization, not always. But that is what we see normally, just people continuously adding fertilizer every year.
What can they do to bring those salt levels down in their soils?
So the salt levels are kind of a relative easy fix. Salt dissolves in water. So we usually recommend just add water through irrigation. That will just kind of dissolve it and leach it through the soil. And it's more of just like an overtime thing. So depending on how high the salt is, that will tell you, how many inches of water to add. to get the salt to go below the growing zone and kind of leach out of the system. So we do have tables that show how many inches to add and things to correct the problem. Biggest thing is you don't want to have the water kind of standing on top because that will kind of bring the salts up again. So you just kind of add it kind of slowly over time. So even if you have just normal sprinkler system, just add the water and kind of let it percolate through.
Oh.
And then add a little bit more and let it percolate through.
Okay.
And that kind of just to kind of slowly get rid of that salt.
Okay, so there is hope for you guys out
Yeah,
there.
exactly.
That is a great solution. This is why we come to you, Tiffany. Yeah. Okay, so on my soil report, it looks like it checks out pretty good. When I first look at it, if I didn't know what it meant in the interpretation part, it says that my phosphorus levels and my potassium levels are high. Should I be concerned? Is it the end of the world for me?
For your report, it's not too high.
Okay.
So it's just barely above that threshold, like I was saying, about 30. And then your potassium's the same way. So it's nothing to be, really concerned about. What happens is the plants will use it up over time, and it will slowly go down. So don't add any fertilizer for a while. Probably about a year or two, you might want to just check it again to see where it's at.
So I apply steer manure compost. Does that have traces of phosphorus? Would that have potassium in there too?
Yeah, it will have both. You're getting that high levels of both of those.
So in this case, I would just lay off my compost then and not apply it for the year.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we do say just kind of wait a year or two before you start adding it again. Oh. And you can definitely check it in between if you're curious. We do have a recommendation for nitrate on there, which is part of every report. Even though you didn't test for it, there is a result there.
Okay.
And that is just general recommendation. So we recommend people put nitrogen on every year. Unlike the phosphorus and potassium, it gets washed out like salt. So with your irrigation, the rainfall, it's going to go through the system. And so we just say, replenish every year, put it to the system, but you probably won't need any phosphorus or potassium.
What's the best way to apply nitrogen to my ground? I know there's liquid solutions, but there's also granular. Is there something more preferable?
Yeah, it is kind of a personal choice, I guess. Yeah. You can definitely pick. Some people like to go the compost organic route, and some people just want the commercial fertilizer. So it does depend on what you like. You would need to find something that has just nitrate. You won't want anything with phosphorus and potassium. So that's kind of where people say, I need nitrate, I'm going to add compost. But in reality, they're adding more things they don't need. You just have to be sure that you're getting what you need and not over-applying. Okay. Something like a urea that's just nitrogen.
Where could the home gardener get urea?
As far as I know, we usually recommend kind of the local gardening shop. They're really helpful. Yeah. So a lot of people take our report in and say, this is what we got back. What do you recommend? And they'll point you in the right direction. We do include the Gardin sheet below that. So that one's included with every report. A little bit of information. So it tells you, we kind of mark where you're at. So we're saying, where your pH is, the salt level. It does tell you a little bit and kind of what different kinds of fertilizer to add. People say, oh yeah, I'm putting on compost every year. I'm like, you might want to check. Just for your own benefit and the plants. If you don't need it, then you don't bother adding it. So
stay tuned for part 2 of my soil test report for next week. I'll catch you in the next video.